Hi there, and welcome today to the Human Touch LinkedIn Live series. And today we're talking about why leadership teams are busy solving the wrong problems and what to do about it. So, hi, Bridget. Thank you for joining. And I'm excited to be here with Bridget Hom, who is a best-selling author and creator of the Prop Method, which is a practical operating system for leadership innovation and problem solving. Um, so, Bridget, again, thanks for being here. And before diving in, I'd love to understand a bit more of how you went. How you mention on your LinkedIn and in other places how you took your business as a side hustle with 3 clients to working with Fortune 500 companies and the leadership track that they have. So what was the moment when you realized that this was actually the work that you were meant to do with leaders in the prop method?
That's a great question, Keith. And thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here with everyone on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn family, because we're all wanting to be more successful, more innovative, and serve more people with solutions. And that's one of the reasons that the prop method is so powerful for many of these companies that I'm working with. What it really started with, Keith, was the mindset. The number one mindset for entrepreneurs and leaders is to be problem aware and solution seeking. And I say that in my first book. I talk about that with absolutely everyone I've ever had a conversation with, because if we're not in a state of mind where we are problem aware and solution seeking, we're never going to get to the level of profitability that we want to get to in companies. We're not going to be able to solve the right problems in our leadership teams. And we're always going to be chasing after the wrong problem and getting trapped in, well, just the never ending to-do list that overcomes many.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting you say that, because one piece of your book that really resonated with me was when you said that leadership teams think they're great problem solvers, but what you do say in the book is that most are solving the wrong problems, which is the first sign that an executive team is stuck in that. Or sorry, what is the first sign that an executive team is stuck in that trap?
Absolutely. So I call it the corporate office trap. It's where you're back-to-back meetings, and I'm sure that any of you are listening are just shaking your heads. Yes, the back-to-back meetings where we're constantly feeling productive, but we're not actually accomplishing the results that we truly deserve. So
Mm.
warning signs to look at is you react instead of solve problems, right? You're rediscussing the same problems every single time you meet. You just keep addressing the same problem, and you are executing without clarity. I would say most of the companies that I talk to, they believe they're solving the right problem. For example, the hiring process. I was
Mm.
working with an accounting company, and they said, I don't understand why I'm struggling with employee retention. Through the prop method, the step 1 is identifying the right problem. Step 2 is identifying opportunities, and step 3 is executing. And so what we realized through a couple of the strategies that I implemented in problem identification was that we were struggling with the right questions through the hiring process. Once we established
Mm.
that problem, then we move forward successfully with hiring people, the right people, and knowing who they were based on
Mm.
principles, not only skill set. And so then had better employee retention. So that's a little example.
I see. Okay, got it. Um, so would you say that, leaders, while maybe, they're asking questions and they're not necessarily the wrong questions, but there are questions that you need to solve and look at before that, right? Before you can dive into that bigger piece, right? Okay.
Exactly. We tend to jump to the bigger picture questions when we
Yeah.
really have all of these underlying questions that we should be addressing first.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's I think that asking problems and then are even more important than solutioning, right? Because it really gives that direction for what you're even doing in the first place. So if it's maybe misaligned there, you're spinning your wheels, and just like you said, you're in meetings after meetings after meetings, talk about maybe the wrong thing.
Well, and
Um,
also, Keith, what we're also not addressing is there is a huge creativity gap in
yeah,
corporations.
say
80% of
more.
people actually say creativity is necessary for success, and only 25% of people feel like they're actually being creative. But what is creativity?
Mm,
What does creative even mean? So
right.
let's define that first. Creativity, had to look this up, is the ability to produce original, appropriate, and valuable ideas or solutions to problems. It's that
Mm,
simple. And the universality principle says that every single person is creative.
hmm.
So, when I don't know about you, Keith, but when I think creative, I think, oh, you make pottery or you're an artist or but the truth is it's so much more than that. Creativity is synonymous with innovation and problem solving. And when you get not only your C-suite team, but your employees on board,
Mm,
your all of your leadership teams, and get them on the same methodology and how to solve problems, well, you fly in sync, right? That made me just think of the Mighty
mhm.
Ducks. Did you watch the Mighty Ducks ever?
Oh, wow. Blast from the past. Yeah. Yes, I have, but not recently.
I have three boys, so that's
Yeah.
why I watch it.
So you have a
Fly
pass. Yeah.
the flying V. You fly in the same direction, and when you do that, you're faster, you're more
Mhm.
productive, proactive, and profitable as a company. Flying V. Let's just think of the prop
Can-
method and the flying V. Same thing.
I love that. But I want to come back to something that you just said in relation to creativity. You mentioned the universality principle and how we're all creative. Can you explain more? What do you mean by that?
I mean that every single person is capable of thinking better and arriving at better solutions and
Mm,
opportunities. We just don't give ourselves the space and the success criteria to solve specific problems.
hmm.
So let me go into that a little bit more, but I also want to address that most 75% of employees feel pressure to be productive and not creative. And that's one of the
Mm,
biggest constraints to employees saying, hey, I've been sitting at this desk forever and now my elbow is killing me or my shoulder is killing me. Hey, why don't I just stop? And what if I just adjust my desk? Right? Or my
mm,
workstation a little bit so I no longer have shoulder pain instead of going to the doctor and then getting a prescription and then all these things. When really, if he just paused with a purpose for a second, said, what if I adjust my
mm,
desk or a different chair? Then I wouldn't have this issue. And what if everyone down the production line was having the same issue or in the same
mm,
office, same issue? What if they just had to reconstruct the desks differently? What if it was
mm.
that one moment to say, hey,
Yeah.
how can I think about this differently?
Yeah, yeah. What comes up for me as you're talking about this, is really kind of having a design first methodology or approach for all of us, regardless if your role doesn't seem creative, right? Just as you're saying. Because once we bring that consciousness into we design our life and our future, then we can start not being so stressed at work, not just going meeting to meeting, being stressed out all the time. And this idea of productivity and innovation, are things too that are interesting, right? Because I feel like, with innovation, that kind of gets to the creativity piece a bit, but productivity and innovation or creativity kind of seem to be at two separate points on a line.
Well,
Love to
yeah,
hear
most
your thoughts on this.
No, most people feel that way. But what if I said it was much more practical than you're thinking about it?
Mm,
Creativity is much more practical than you think about it. Like, for example, and I put this example in the book, the company Toyota, they addressed frontline innovation. So they empowered their frontline workers to actually give their input.
mm,
What did that create? 1 million suggestions annually and 85% implementation, because the workers closest to the problem defines it best.
mm.
And so when
Yeah.
you actually ask people, and we call it organic market research, right? But most of us, the C-suite teams I'm working with are all collectively asking one another what they think. But that valuable input would actually help you to solve and streamline your company's solving experience. They created a new communication process. Same
Mm,
with hospital systems. Based for infection control, which, I mean, it was a real problem. I've heard some really interesting stories about that. But leadership thought they needed better technology. And
mm,
then they
mm.
went to actually address the best ideas came from the nurses and the cleaning staff. So,
I'm not surprised actually, but yeah,
right,
continue.
well, here's the thing. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You're like,
Mm,
oh, that's silly. I mean, why wouldn't we
mhm,
ask opinion? But think of the day-to-day operations. When do the leadership teams have time to actually ask for the input? Have they implemented a process or a procedure to do that?
mhm. No. You know?
So what happened was they had improved cleaning protocols, right? They had
Right.
better supply placement, and they had small behavior changes, which made of overall better environment. So that's the prop system, the prop method at work.
Mm. So, is it fair to say that the prop method looks at problems not just from the top down or from senior leadership, but also from the bottom up, from janitors to entry level workers? All the levels. Yeah, correct.
Yes, well said, because actually any company can use the prop method, because we're
Hmm.
all caught in this constant state of either doing or distraction, especially in our driven culture. And
Hmm.
that's something that I love about the US personally. I love that we're driven. I talk to people all over the world and they say, listen, I want to be in the US markets. I love how you guys are so driven and innovative. And I
Mm,
agree. I love living here. But the downside of that is that we're constantly in a place where we're running in circles in many of our ideologies, our
mm,
ideas. And
hmm.
in order for companies to continue to expand and grow, they need to actually help all of their people to start thinking in a different methodology so that they can
Hmm.
go in the
Hmm.
flying V keeps coming
Yeah.
up for me.
But it's a good visual for what we're talking about now, um and I it's very easy for me to see what you're talking about in my head, and basically it's not just the C-suite or the VPs or directors that are coming together, but it's everyone coming together in one motion. But I guess one thing that comes to mind is like in practicality, right? Um,
Mhm.
the different type of work that people are doing.
Mhm.
In some organizations, it's not all knowledge work, right? Or not all
Correct.
communication work or what have you. How are you able to take time out of your day and your approach to really go down and really see how things are under at base level? Kind of like you could say, like, what is the TV show? Undercover Boss. It's kind of what I'm thinking here.
Yes. So it's actually very simple. Just I could diagnose through conversations with the different leaders and the C-suite to
Mm,
hear, and the employees to hear all the different angles of what's actually going on to give an accurate diagnoses. So how we're
mm,
going to apply the prop method, because the prop method works for logistic companies, manufacturing companies, Fortune 500 companies, healthcare companies. It really works
mhm,
for everyone. It's one of those methodologies like EOS, right? You're familiar with EOS.
mhm,
It's the practical operating system that can work within each company. So I
mhm,
equip companies to implement the method of thinking into all of their doing, so their doing is more efficient and effective.
mm. So this is great. I mean, you can apply it to any type of business. It's not just one specific industry. But how do you know? Uh, I guess how do you know really if you need the prop method and how you can support them, right? Rather than trying to figure everything out on our own, which I feel like so many of us in the knowledge workspace try to do. You know.
Well, first off, many people are saying how you would diagnose that, hey, I might need help. Typically, people are problem aware and solution seeking. They're running
Mm,
into conflict. They're
mm-hmm,
running into reactionary people on their team. They're running into
mm-hmm,
communication issues, and communication is typically the first breakdown and
mm-hmm,
warning sign that, hey, something's not functioning properly for us.
mm,
If
mm-hmm,
you're lacking in employee retention, if a lot of your staff is leaving or staying
mm-hmm,
for a time and then saying, I'm out of here because your
mm-hmm,
system is broken or it's not working efficiently. When your people don't feel heard,
mm-hmm,
uh, when your production goes down
mm,
in your company, when you have a loss of profitability, there's a
mm,
breakdown where you need to effectively diagnose the problem. So those
mm-hmm,
are just
mm-hmm.
a couple of key warning signs.
Yeah,
If you feel like you need, if you're having any of these, absolutely chat bridgethom.me. We could chat and do a diagnosis of what's going on for your company. And so that I can give
yeah.
you some quick suggestions to start to implement immediately in this. But Keith, there was something else that I wanted to address, and especially with how prevalent AI is these days, and it's only getting more prevalent. And a lot of companies don't know how to
Mm-hmm,
implement, handle it, communicate, or utilize it effectively. And I know that's what you do,
mm,
you know, more so. But a lot of people are saying 58% of technology actually helps them to overcome creative barriers. And so
mm,
I actually see it as a huge tool. Once you get the methodology and the right mindset in place, then AI
mm-hmm,
can really be utilized as a beneficial tool to move forward with that company growth.
mm.
What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I think that um, there's so many different ways we can use AI, and one common way I see people using it is more to produce things faster, more efficiently, right? And similar to what you're saying, I think it's very smart to be thinking AI more as a thought partner to really push your ideas forward and bring more capacity to your ideas that maybe you weren't able to uncover on your own, right? As your thought, we all have different thought patterns. So I definitely agree with you on that direction. I think one difficulty that I see in organizations is um, like maybe leadership knows this, or some people like mid-level know this, but in terms of systematizing it in a way that is really going to meet the metrics of the business, you know, at P&L, right, for example, and driving efficiency, like that's the dilemma and the difficulty about how you're rolling out creativity and really bringing it in through learning and development or what have you, to make sure, just as you said, that all of the birds are flying in V line versus, you know, the seagulls in the parking lot trying to, you know, get the food on the ground.
The birds, the hockey players, whatever. Yes. Flying team, the employees, the C-suite team, everyone. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, so funny. Yeah. Um, yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of the work both you and I do, there's a big overlap there, right? In terms of the creativity piece and then how
Mhm.
you're driving that for overall adoption within an organization. And that brings me to my next question. I'm curious, like, there's the leadership team and bringing on this approach within that. Are there strategies and ways that you think you can bring this approach into an entire organization, not just within, um, the leadership?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's a process, and we go from the top down,
Mm, mhm,
and
mhm,
it creates a ripple effect. We talk the leadership team, and then the managers, and then the supervisors, and then the employees. So it comes from the top down. And so once I equip the leadership team to effectively implement the prop method, then they start to meet with the managers, and then we start to meet together. And so we start to schedule a time once a month via Zoom to all meet together to talk about solving problems through the prop method. And so we address these problems
Mm,
in real time on a
yeah.
weekly and monthly basis based on who I'm meeting with, the leadership team or the managers, and then in the employees. I speak to all of them, and
Hmm.
with Zoom, it's exceptionally easy to get access to everyone. And then I send them the recording so that everyone can rehearse. And because when you actually learn something for the first time, or say the people who are listening on this live, will only retain 20% of what we just heard. And so I
Hmm.
send recordings, I send notes, and this becomes more than just a theory or a framework. This actually becomes the way people start to function in the
Yeah.
environments. It's interesting. It changes the environment because everyone now has a shared language.
Yeah. Yeah. I I love that, and I love how you said that it's not just like a one-time learning, or like you learn, each piece of prop and then you go and fly on your own, right? But it's about taking the mindful approach of week after week, identifying problems, going through the process that you teach and you really bring into the organizations, more than just telling, because you're totally right. That's how things change. That's how adoption happens, is when it becomes a habit. And that's the beginning of behavior change. So I love that. That really resonates.
Yes, it's not about information, it's about implementation that creates that
Right.
real growth and true alignment. Um,
Hmm.
so because I would say organizations don't fail because they lack effort, they fail because of lack of
Mm,
shared thinking, um, alignment, and execution towards a common goal.
hmm. 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 Yeah, I very much agree. It's not about effort, right? I mean, if
No,
if things only happened on all the effort you gave in, then I mean, we would have tons of billionaires everywhere. But it's being smart about your time and time you spend on something doesn't mean the effectiveness of it. So um, that
exactly.
that's that's great. And um, I would say, if there's one thing that you want our listeners today to take from our talk, what would that piece be? That nugget that they can think about throughout their day, and as they support themselves moving forward, hopefully leveraging pieces of the prop method.
Absolutely. So let's just start with something simple. Two strategies to start implementing to be more problem aware and solution seeking. Number one, before you get into your day, set a 2-minute timer and write
Mm,
down the three top ways to monetize your company today and the three top activities to delegate today.
mhm, mhm,
Another activity is if you feel like you're solving the wrong problem or you're confused about an aspect of your company growth at the moment, you
mhm,
can say, you could do the 5 whys exercise.
mm,
Why is my company not growing in this area? Right. And you
mhm,
repeat the process. You answer yourself, and then you ask another why question to that answer. And you repeat
mhm,
that 5 times. Another strategy that you can implement is called the multiple choice answer. So
mm,
you ask yourself a question because your subconscious mind knows the answer that your conscious mind does not, because your conscious
mhm,
mind is always in the doing of the day. And your conscious mind is that deeper knowledge base that you have. And so how you access it is through writing. So if you say, what
mhm,
problem am I trying to solve today? Give yourself
mhm,
multiple choice answers like the high school SAT, A, B, C, D, E, F. And
mm,
you'll be able to see because you don't sit in judgment of yourself, right? The
mhm,
prop helps you to sustain judgment, assumption bias, previous experiences, because our brain's always looking for patterns. And so you actually give yourself the opportunity to see potentially what might be the right problem to be solving right now. So those
mhm,
are the three strategies that anyone can start implementing right now to start
mhm.
problem solving more effectively.
Yeah. And what I think is so helpful with that is it's starting from within. And it's not about like talking to other people or setting up a meeting or something, but it's really tuning into what you already know, whether that's conscious or subconscious, to help you problem solve, yes, but also just get clarity on where you are in what you're doing just overall in your work. So, um,
Yes, and when all of the leadership team does this, then they're able to show up authentically, and everyone
mhm,
has a voice at the table, the introverts, the extroverts, everyone's being honored, and they're also very clear on what problem they believe they should be solving so that everyone can come together on the same page. And the same
mm,
with the intentionality principle too. Every single person wants to be more present and intentional. And so
mm,
just that simple exercise of the 2-minute brain dump can help any single person be more intentional, slow down so that they're even
mhm,
aware of the problems that are around them and that they can be a part
mm,
of that solution.
mhm. Yeah, and that comes not from being in meetings and being asked immediately to answer answer a question, right? Yeah, but through
It does
contemplation. Yeah.
exactly. And then it will help you come to arrive at answers faster and
Mm,
better.
yeah. This, I think there's so much value that you shared today with us, Bridget. Both, yes, in terms of the prop method, but also in terms of how we think about um, actual creativity in how you've defined it, which I think, as we said, is a bit different than how most people standardly think about it, like doing pottery or being an actor. But how we can bring creativity and this mindfulness piece into our work so that we're then able to come in strong to identifying problems and working with others to to go through not just the prop method, but really identify what's going on here and then take action accordingly, with not just by putting in tons of effort. So yeah. Um, so can I share with you and the rest of the listeners kind of the one sentence that I've been thinking about and putting together about what we've talked about today?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what my biggest takeaway I would say succinctly is great leadership isn't just about having more answers or even being the one who's the center of the questions and answers, but it's really just about asking better questions because
Mhm.
questions is where things start. So and in the prop method, that's where it starts with the problem. So, um, that's what has stuck with me in particular about the prop method and what we've talked about today from being a senior leader and shifting my approach. Does that make sense? Am I correct in interpreting things?
Yes, absolutely. And it takes a lot of weight off the leader's shoulders
Yeah.
because when you equip everyone on your team to be more problem aware and solution seeking, critical thinking, and believing that they're creative and they have a voice at the table to solve
Hmm.
problems, people take ownership. And
Hmm.
every single
Hmm.
person is more productive, proactive, and profitable in their individual roles.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many nuggets from this, and we'll definitely be sharing these out with on social media throughout next week and this week, what have you. But before we wrap, Bridget, for the leaders watching right now who are seeing themselves in everything you just described, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Right here, bridgethom.me is my direct calendar link so we can have a 30-minute conversation about
Mm,
what are the problems you're experiencing in your company. It'll be a real conversation. I'll give you some direction. And if the prop method makes sense for you, then I'll tell you what that looks like.
yeah. That's great. So the quick asks for today are to go to bridgethome.me to schedule time with Bridget, and also if if you found this helpful and there's one or two leaders on your team who you think could find value from this, please share this live. And we want to share as much of this knowledge as we can. So that would be a good place for to be a catalyst for
Oh,
helping others.
absolutely. And if you'd like to get the book and start researching before
Ah,
thepropmethod.com will get you to the book.
thepropmethod.com. Okay. And after we get off today, I can write that in the comments. So if you're seeing this afterwards, you can just click on that link.
Hashtag replay.
Hashtag replay. Yes. So, Bridget, thank you so much for your time and generosity today. This was a true masterclass, in the prop method and seeing leadership problems and opportunities in a new light. And for everyone watching here, we'll see you on the next episode of The Human Touch. Take care, everyone.